On that note, we shall get to our first issue, which is issue 1, DNC.
He is clearly in over his head. He cannot meet this moment. He simply cannot be who we need him to be for us. It is what it is.
Democrats this week crowned Joe Biden as their presidential nominee, mostly virtual due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Democratic National Convention offered a familiar mix of political passion and patent partisanship. But while Joe Biden was repeatedly saluted as the man to lead America forwards, his opponent, President Donald Trump, also featured heavily. Some believe the focus on Trump illustrates the Democratic Party assessment that Biden's greatest strength is the fact that he is not Donald Trump.
Pat, your thoughts on the Democratic Convention and this balancing of new ideas and scathing attacks on President Trump?
Well, I think it was in good part a success, a technical success, certainly. I think they showed the unity and diversity of the party. They reintroduced Kamala Harris in a kinder, gentler role than the lady of the debate and the lady that went after Judge Kavanaugh. They also went after Donald Trump as the Lucifer of America, responsible for 170,000 American deaths and a threat to democracy if we reelect him. I've never seen anyone pounded so hard. But there was two places where they failed. They did not address at all or even raise the issue of the real violence and riots and disorders that are continuing night after night in Democratic cities in blue states like Portland and Seattle and Chicago and New York. And so that's one of the problems they're going to have to deal with. The second is we haven't heard from Joe Biden. And this is the big event of this convention is tonight. Everybody, including half the Democratic Party, fears that there may be some problem with Joe. So everybody's going to be watching tonight for that.
Eleanor, your thoughts?
I think it was a tremendous success. I think it alters conventions forever going forward. There was an intimacy about this that you couldn't get in a large hall with people wearing funny hats and clapping and yelling and screaming. I think the women, Michelle Obama, this woman has sold 10 million books. She is an incredible communicator. And she made the point that President Trump is not up to the job. Secondly, Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden, made the connection between the healing of a broken family when she married Joe Biden after the death of his wife and a daughter, and the healing of a nation, speaking from an empty schoolroom. It was powerful stuff. And then two former presidents, Bill Clinton made the case that if you want a president who watches television all day and tweets, Trump's your man. And Barack Obama came in, it was his idea that he should speak before Kamala Harris so that Kamala Harris could use her time to tell her very powerful story, which is an American story, again, of blended roots, blended marriage, and diversity. And Barack Obama made the case that our democracy is at stake. Nothing less than our democracy is at stake. And Barack Obama, his idea was to follow in the footsteps of the two Bush presidents, to be gracious to his successor and not speak out. He has largely held to that, no more. And I think that was communicated, is being communicated to Democrats. Okay. Vote as if your life depends on it, because it does.
Right. James, do you think there is a challenge here for Democrats that they may have been too scathing, too extreme in terms of their presentation of what a second Trump term would be, in the sense that in 2016, we heard a lot of those messages. They didn't get through, evidently, and the world, at least for the moment, hasn't blown up.
Well, I think it's important to consider the fact that all conventions have to try to do at least two things. First, they have to advocate their candidate, in this case, Joe Biden, and to diminish their opponent, in this case, Donald Trump. They've certainly done that. As Eleanor was rightly pointing out, they have rolled out the big guns in an attempt to do so. And we've heard very, very explicitly from former President Barack Obama his views on Donald Trump and his presidency. I think that the great challenge the Democrats face, however, is not, are they going to be accused of doing too much in terms of going after Donald Trump? Because I think two things are clear here. One is that many people's views of Donald Trump have been baked in long ago. If you look at his opinion poll ratings, they really haven't fluctuated very much. They certainly haven't really climbed over 50%, which most presidents would expect at some point in their administration. And finally, I think it's important to remember that we need to consider the problem of the Democrats of getting people out to vote. Hillary lost 4 years ago, not because of a great spike in Republican turnout, but simply because people of color and women in particular simply didn't support Hillary Clinton in the way that many people expected to. And you saw a 5 million decline in the Democratic turnout. They simply have to vote, as Eleanor rightly pointed out, as though their lives depended upon it. And if they don't go out to vote, decisions are made by people who show up.
Okay.
And we will have to wait and see quite how the figures bounce after both conventions have been held, I think.
Clarence, your thoughts?
I noticed a real contrast with 4 years ago. We had President Trump talking about America as American carnage, a real apocalyptic vision. The streets were on fire. Listen to Donald Trump's descriptions, and I was there both at the convention inauguration, and I said, "That's America, not the current America." It was Donald Trump's imagination, but for his base, many of whom were a lot more rural and outer suburban than the Democratic base, that was their vision of the city. You don't need to show riots on the streets now, Pat, because they've always been there as far as the Donald Trump's base is concerned. But now look what's happening. Under Donald Trump's presidency, we really do have riots on the street. We really do have buildings being set on fire. It's still not an apocalyptic America, but I'll blame President Obama for being no more Mr. Nice Guy now. Last time he followed the usual tradition of not being critical of his predecessor. Now all bets are off because Donald Trump hasn't hesitated to be critical of him. And Obama laid it out that yeah, folks, we got kids in cages now. We've got visions you thought that couldn't happen. It's happening. And it's going to get worse. Both he and Michelle and others touched on this. But it's certainly, I would say the contest is on now. We're going to have a real conflict of visions, if you will, between these two presidents, one current president, one ex-president. Right. And that's what the debate is now. Can the Democrats bring us back to a more normal America?
So we've got about 3 minutes left. So if we quickly go around the table again with some final thoughts. Pat, you go first, and then I'll go to Eleanor.
Yeah, I think we've got about 11 weeks to the election. And these demonstrations, riots, pillaging, they're continuing and getting worse and worse. And many people in these states, which are all very big, liberal blue states, are really reacting hostilely to what's going on, and they want it stopped. Secondly, as to Barack Obama, clearly he was in some despair and anguish and hurt and angry, and it came through authentically. But I don't think that's effective because that goes against the grain.
Eleanor.
Well, Pat gave away the dirty little secret that we're taping this on Thursday before Joe Biden speaks, so he could float out the idea that Biden is not up to it. We'll see about that. And talking about the carnage going on in the various cities, the carnage that's going on is 170,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus. Attempts to open up schools have been shut down immediately, college campuses, K through 12 schools, because they can't get a grip on reining in a virus. And everybody agrees that Trump has failed in his job as a national leader. He owns the country. It's not each individual governor owning his state. The lack of a national plan and the lack of any courage to even suggest people should wear masks, the failure lands at the doorstep. And the president, I don't know how they're going to handle that at the convention next week, because the happy talk that he spins forth in the White House press room is not going to sell nationally.
James.
So the Democrats have had the slight disadvantage of going first. They've had to nurture this new technology. They seem to have done that pretty well. But of course, what that gives is the Republicans the advantage of going second, so they can react very much to everything that the Democrats say this week. It's going to be fascinating to see how they handle technology, how they handle the setting in contrast to what the Democrats have done this week. I heartily imagine they're going to go after Kamala Harris with a scorched earth policy, quite frankly, of suggesting that she'll be a heartbeat away from the presidency. And to echo what Pat was saying, raising all kinds of health concerns about Joe Biden as a result of that. Do you really want this woman a heartbeat away from the presidency with the brief resume that she has to her advantage? And finally, also, I'm sure they'll go after the Democrats' use of Hollywood superstars to introduce these individuals on a nightly basis. And again, hark that back to Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, suggesting that the Democrats would rather be hanging out with the likes of Kanye West and Jay-Z, for example, than normal Americans.
All right, Clarence.
Kanye is on the Republican side now.
Yeah, I know, I realize that.
Kanye's running against President Trump. This is now a turnout game. Hillary Clinton certainly touched on it. This is not woulda, coulda, shoulda. The victory last time around came down to a few thousand people in the right states, and that's probably going to be what happens again this time. And it's very important that the Democrats stress this point. I think they made the point very well this week. And that's going to be also an issue about experience. How about Donald Trump's experience? When he came into office, his experience was mainly in television. And he showed himself to be a terrific TV performer and even TV director or producer. But when it comes to handling a crisis, especially a crisis he did not create himself, like both the coronavirus and the troubles in the streets, the racial reckoning, he's proved himself to be quite inept, although he constantly talks and says things people know aren't true. It's going to be interesting to see how far he can get with that this time around.
All right.